U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. The views, opinions, and content of this publication are those of the author and do not necessarily reflect the views, opinions, and policies of SAMHSA or HHS. David.
Thank you, Tess. Hi, I'm Dave Armstrong, one of the founding members from New Jersey. Welcome to the National Early Childhood Family Network, first educational webinar for engaging parents and professionals as we work together on our mission to live in a world where all children birth to age are safe, healthy, and inspired to lifelong learning. Could you please advance the slide? In February 2018, 55 family members who are connected to Project Launch grantees gathered at SAMHSA for a Family Leadership Summit and committed to creating a national early childhood family network, ECFN. Since February, family members across the country have been meeting virtually to turn their vision into a reality. Please advance the slide. Parent leadership. I want to attribute this quote to Parents Anonymous, which is a national parent organization which originated in California. Being a parent leader has given me confidence and raised my self-esteem for me. Parent leadership has meant that I have found a place where I can make a difference, a place where my experiences and ideas are valued. Caroline.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Caroline Austin, and I'm one of the founder members of the ECFN. I just wanted to tell you a little bit about my journey as an example. I think it's fair to say that I've always been involved in parent leadership in some way, shape, or form. Over 20 years ago, I worked as an intern at the Center for Law and Social Justice, setting up workshops for young mothers and helping to process applications for the Affordable Home Buyers Program in Brooklyn, Bedford-Stuyvesant, Brooklyn, New York. And that was even before I had a child. When I moved out here, I was given the opportunity to take leadership classes and see change happen firsthand within a local community action agency. Among other community work and having to advocate for services for my then younger son in school, I joined the Asylum Hill Family Center 15 years ago and became a parent ambassador 7 years ago. As a result, I've been trained as a PEP, People Empowering People Facilitator, PLTI Parent Leadership Training Facilitator, and Community Cafe Trainer. I've been a grant reviewer where, because of the comments that I made, communities were joined together. Myself and other parents were given the opportunity to be involved with the 2Gen statewide planning committee and pilot initiative, and I was able to become a consultant for community engagement with the Hartford Foundation for Public Giving. There's so much more that I can say. However, it's important to note that none of this would have been possible without the support and encouragement of people who helped to build the leadership capacity that they saw within me. I learned to adopt what my father tried to teach me in my early life, and that is leadership is the ability to make changes with where you are with what you have. And whether it's one person or a mass of people, lives are impacted, hopefully, for the better. Sorry. The mission of the National Early Childhood Family Network is a network of families and agencies committed. We are a network of family and agencies committed to increasing awareness of early childhood experiences by providing resources and trainings to families of young children. We aim to bring families together locally and nationally to increase our collective voice and to advocate for policies and educational research that promote the well-being of young children and their families regardless of race, religion, or social economic status. Please watch this video on the National Early Childhood Network 2018 Launch Family Leadership Summit.
Most of it is that we all started by telling our story. And so when you tell your story, think of the goal that you want, whoever's listening to it. Craft your story, because each of you have a powerful story.
Project Launch is very important to our children. With my grandson, that there were more grandsons, more kids like him and stuff. So I became a parent leader to be able to gather knowledge. Knowledge is power.
With my own daughter, I was powerless because she was struggling.
Nobody has a right to tell me or tell any child in the world that you do not have solutions.
I was always being told, you discipline at home, we'll discipline in school.
And we built a network, we built a coalition within the school, and we unseated the board and took over the school. But then you translate that into creating a movement to affect change on the community level.
We set out to create this forum for family leaders to come together and really explore what does it take to lead, who are you as a leader.
The first question is always not what's your vision, is what is your mission.
We want to equip families to have knowledge and skill to deal with social emotional development.
Being able to take the perspective of the child and carry that through.
I engage parents and family on their level, not my level.
Locking in those networks.
Action-oriented.
In your helpful network, you need to have purpose.
Advocacy really is, how does it make you feel?
You need to have clear goals.
We made a list of things that we're going to need to purchase, supplies.
And you need to make sure you have the right team, like the right people on the bus. But we want parents in their story, but I want a parent who's a grant writer. We need to maximize our family members for that other thing that they have. A lot of us parents are all trying to do the same thing individually. And you may have the idea, this person may have the details, and this person may know how to get the money, this other person may be good at getting feet on the ground. And as you use and you bring all these people together,
You will be infinitely more powerful.
open up your text.
What's one word? What do we want for our young children? Type that in.
And people said that we were nobody. But when we came together,
Yeah. I have the honor of introducing our presenter. Dr. Alice Farrell is the president of Olive Branch Clinical and Consulting Services and a parent of 8 children and grandmother of 5 grandchildren. She has a doctorate degree in jurisprudence and a master's of social work degree. Dr. Farrell is a licensed clinical social worker, published author, and international trainer. Dr. Farrell has worked in the social work field for over 27 years, testifying at the Connecticut Legislature on children and family issues and providing leadership on state and local behavioral health and child welfare-related advisory councils. She is a former adjunct professor of the University of Connecticut's Master of Social Work program and the District Director of Family Ministries at the Church of God of Prophecy. Dr. Farrell has continued to partner with parents, continues to partner with parents, providers, and parent-led organizations to promote parent leadership and community organization and mobilization. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you Dr. Alice Farrell.
Hi, Alice. I just want to remind you that you may have your telephone on mute, so go ahead and unmute your telephone.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's a delight to be on the line with you all. I have about an hour to share, and I look forward to your questions at the end of the sharing. The question that is posted is, why focus on family, youth, and community engagement? And I'd first like to share that I have had many opportunities to work in the behavioral health arena with children and families, with providers, with community leaders, within the faith community, as well as the provider network in general. And I have had many questions about the impact of on engagement on the children and family and community outcomes. I have to share that it was in a conversation with a colleague and friend who has now passed on, Merva Jackson, who was the executive director of the African Caribbean American Parents for Children with Disabilities organization, that this surfaced. We had a conversation about the evidence-based programs and the services that were being provided. And one comment that she made that resonated with me was, we can have all the best evidence-based programs. We can have the variation of processes, but unless we're able to effectively connect with our families, we miss tremendous amount of opportunities to be supportive and to be help in the process of moving them along in terms of their care, whether it be behavioral health, mental health, substance use-related issues, or in the school setting. Subsequent to that, I've been doing a lot of interviews in the international conferences and national conferences around engagement and some strategies and practices that folks are using. And so I will share some of those pieces as we go along in this session. The reality and trends. Even if it's a cursory glance at the research, one will quickly be able to see the impact of family, youth, and community engagement. And when it is effective, it's reported as having positive outcomes. Positive outcomes in terms of the actual connection with the families and individuals and the communities, but in addition, the actual product, whatever it is that the person is attempting to do with the families and communities. We see, again, whether it's in behavioral health, juvenile justice, child welfare, education, having effective engagement as a central theme to the work is critical and does have positive outcomes. When we look at the lack of engagement and what that means, we can quickly see where the disparities stem from, and we can tap naturally into the information that's there. So, for example, we know that when the laws and the policies and the practices are not fair, they're unjust, we know that it has a tremendous burden on individuals and families, and in particular, individuals and families who have been traditionally marginalized and or oppressed in some way, shape, or form. When we have the lack of engagement, we do see, and the research will show us, that the quality of services is less than ideal and actually poor. We see the lack of cultural and linguistically appropriate services. We see the resistance in some instances to the practice of inclusion. We see opportunity gaps in education, and we see the disparities across in terms of the representation of people of color, children of color, youth of color in the juvenile justice system. When we lack engagement, it's natural to see how those elements surface. Now, there are other factors that influence that, but I did want to highlight the role of engagement or lack thereof. Trends, families and youth are advocating for quality services. They're making their voices heard on the local platform, on the national platform, and on international platforms. In terms of the promotion of consensus and building and the development of authentic partnerships, that is a priority for many of the stakeholder groups, including the funders. That there is a demonstration that there's partnership is happening between families, youth, communities, and it's reflected in many of the requests for proposals that are being sent out and requiring a demonstration of such partnership. So again, the reality is family engagement, family involvement, youth and community engagement and involvement are essential components to the quality of care and to the successes of our children, our families, our neighborhoods, our blocks, our communities, cities, states, nation, and globally. If you look at the regulatory accreditation agencies and professional associations, we can also see why this is very important and what's happening in terms of trend. I have a few bullets here, but I'd like to highlight, for example, the National Association for the Education of Young Children. It's very clear in their position papers on inclusion and diversity. Very clear in terms of their expectation, whether it be physical changes to the environment or, in fact, ensuring that the culture within the environments that young children are being taught and cared for, that they are indeed safe psychologically and emotionally. And another emphasis for the NIAC, National Association for the Education of Young Children, is clear. They're very clear around bidirectional communication, where the communication goes to and fro between the parents and families and the organizations, and that there's clear, open communication structures in place. When we just to jump down for a moment to maybe in the behavioral health arena, Joint Commission, Council on Accreditation, they're very clear about the engagement practices and that the services that are provided are culturally and linguistically appropriately and have established principles that they're expecting those who are requesting their accreditation, that they fulfill them, and they have a platform to provide their services based on those principles. When we also see the Professional Association Code of Ethics in terms of competencies, many and most, if not all, require the engagement component, the connection component, as a platform, as a beginning place in order to begin the actual work, since it actually needs the alignment and the connection with the individuals whom they're serving. I'm just going to go ahead to the next slide. And now we're going to just touch on some examples of engagement approaches and frameworks that many of you on the line may be very familiar with and may actually be implementing in your different communities. I'm just mentioning a few, as there are so many out there. Okay, so the dual capacity framework, in terms of the first bullet, I'm particularly interested in that one and have been because of the focus on developing the competencies of both parents and educators simultaneously. It is a beautiful thing to think about the provider world and the educators all being trained in their respective professional development settings. And then parents and family members are receiving some training in their respective places. However, bringing them together, it's a powerful, powerful process and a strategy that allows for the development of relationships. It allows for individuals to experience their own biases and prejudices and be in a vulnerable space sometimes, but working through it in order to be able to be effective in the engagement of their mutual students and child. So it's this particular one, dual capacity framework. Again, it builds the capacities and the competencies and skill sets of both educators and the parents. And this, under this actually, one of the things that I really appreciated is the fact that parents are able to actually look and see the multiple roles that they have. And when I think about it, and having 8 children, I agree. Being a mentor, being an educator, being a supporter, being a supervisor, all of the different roles that parents have. We can go down to Joyce Epstein, 6 types of categories for family involvement. This one is very familiar to many individuals who are in the school setting, and in particular the parenting one. I would like to just speak for a moment. The parenting component, it's speaking to all of the things that parents do to raise their children. And in addition to that, though, it speaks to the fact that parents having the ability and the opportunity to learn about child and adolescent development is a crucial factor and very important to assist them in the work that they do day in and day out with their children. The strengthening families protective factors, in this particular area, if you just a simple Google, and again, many of you may be doing this program and have this, not just program, but actually have this as a platform for the work that you do. It is very clear around the social network, expanding the social network of the parents, in looking at the individual resilience, also in the provision of concrete services, and again, looking at the social and emotional development of children. All of these pieces, you can, when you step back and you think about how does this help me to connect with families who then can provide the services, not the services, but who then can raise their children or work on the development of their children's social, emotional, and physical aspects. And it is this. It's actually stating to us that there are some practices that when you're using them effectively, it helps to connect us in a way that says, we are here to come alongside you, you parent who are the first parent or the first teacher, the most important relationship for your child. And we're just coming alongside you, recognizing that you do have these strengths and you do have a platform that you're already working on. And we're just coming alongside you to support you in that. By doing such, we actually counteract and combat the disparities that we know is prevalent in many of our families' lives. I'm going to go down for a moment to the Early Head Start Home Visiting Program model. And that one in particular has, I believe, 9 principles. And the one that I'd like to emphasize is they highlight there must be meaningful opportunities for parents to participate and to influence agencies, programs, their mission, their vision, their policies, and their practices. Again, why focus on engagement? It is imperative because it is a strategy in and of itself to counteract and combat the disparities as well as the negative suppression and oppression, all the different isms that we know is out there is critical. And again, I will speak to that as we go along. So strategies and practices, just continuing for a moment. The establishing of trauma-informed schools and community environments. This is an actual, okay, I took myself off of speaker. Hopefully that works better too. So establishing trauma-informed schools and community environments. This is critical in terms of family engagement and in terms of the involvement of parents as parent leaders and ambassadors within the school setting. We are very clear, and it's throughout the research, that some environments are not emotionally and psychologically safe for individuals, for children, for parents going back to the different schools that they themselves went to when they were younger. And the Substance Abuse Mental Health Administration Services actually had a concept paper that will be referenced in the PowerPoint as we go along. And it is very important that every stakeholder group within an environment experience emotional and psychological as well as the physical safety. When that is a priority, it does help to sustain engagement of individuals who want to participate and be present in different environments. Use of evidence-based social and emotional learning programs. This is also essential for young people and the children that we are serving, the 0 to 8 population and beyond. The focusing has primarily been on the academic component of a child, but thinking more broadly about the whole person as the child, social and emotional, the spiritual aspect of the person, the child, it's all necessary. And so the emphasis now is on making certain that the programs, the early child care education programs in schools emphasize and infuse teaching and learning around social and emotional skills. And because of the fact that in order to really experience the academic setting in a positive way, having your social and emotional well-being a focus is imperative. Let's just look for a moment on recognizing students, parents, teachers, and community resilience. That is also an essential component of engagement. When we, whether it's a parent advocate, parent leader, provider, any one of us encountering or going to work with any individual, there must be the thinking and the platform of a strength-based approach and to think about the resilience of these stakeholder groups. It's not a mentality or an orientation of going in to save, but rather to support and again to recognize and acknowledge and affirm their resilience. Going to the next slide. I mentioned for the Joyce Epstein work, I mentioned the parenting component, the decision-making piece, the fourth block. That is a key component when we're thinking about parents and families being advocates and being strong leaders. Them having the meaningful opportunities and meaningful activities within organizations, whatever the structures may be, is imperative. Again, from the platform of each family member, each parent brings to the table their experiences and their expertise in their history, in their culture, in the care of their children, in their geographic knowledge, the community culture, and they bring all of that to the table. And when decisions need to be made that will impact and influence any part of the communities, they should be involved in that process. The community collaboration with this model is emphasized tremendously. And again, as I've mentioned previously, the funders are also looking for community collaboration, particularly as we look at the funding being restricted or limited and resources shrinking and different policies affecting the release of monies and so forth. The leveraging and partnering is a key element that is emphasized as we do engagement work and as we do parent advocacy and leadership related initiatives. Okay, these are some family engagement. Just continuing here, I just have a few bullets here, and I'd like to just highlight in the national state one, I'd like to highlight Oakland, California, under California. And for this particular organization, I had the opportunity last year in Hawaii to learn about their work and subsequently had some conversations with the executive director and their leaders. And in terms of engagement, these founders was disengaged from the school setting. They left the school setting because there was no engagement for them. They returned to their community and decided that they were going to begin another process. They were going to establish an organization that would focus on engaging students and would help schools to create very creative programs that will help to motivate individuals to participate in their education and their academic experience. And they make sure that they have what they call a wisdom circle. So individuals in their community who can help shape and design the way the program would be implemented. They make sure that the youth involvement is meaningful and the parents have access to them. What they shared with me as I listened to them was one word: love. That is an essential ingredient to the work that we're doing as we think about engaging individuals and families and their communities. When we look at Kenya, for example, I'm just going to pick a couple of things. Kenya. In Kenya, the work that I'm thinking about and is sharing around is the fact that a particular program, parenting program, wanted to begin the work in Kenya, a particular region in Kenya, and Kenya, Africa, and they could not enter into that village without first engaging the chief of that village, and they could not proceed without engaging the mother of that community. And likewise, here, we are seeing more efforts toward identifying who in the community is needed to be able to partner with for us to better understand the culture of that community, whether it's a block, whether it's a full neighborhood, or an extended section of a city. So brokering is a critical component, looking for that individual, looking for those individuals. And what it must be noted is that these individuals may not have the title that may be given from some institution, if you will, and some may, but some may not. They are the folk, however, who are trusted in that community, who are knowledgeable, who have what we would call institutional knowledge, community knowledge that extends sometimes beyond one generation. When we look at the work that's happening, let's say in Sydney, Australia, there's one particular, and then I'll move on, there's one particular agency that I looked at in terms of their parent leadership and what they thought about the work that needs to be done and how it can be done. And they simply make a statement that parent involvement in leadership is central to everything they do. And with that, they ensure that they have parents who are available for welcoming of new parents, because they understand that individuals come from all parts of the world coming into Switzerland. And so they make sure that they have access, the parents have access to other resources within the school, similar to community schools. But in addition to the general programs that they have, they make sure that it is run. They have an executive, what they call an executive parent leader, who makes certain that their parents are welcome and that they understand that it's not just learning a new language, but learning the entire culture. I will move on to, I'm going to just move on. Sorry, I'll go back one. Okay. From the, looking at Oklahoma, in that state, there was a focus a few years back on obesity and addressing obesity. And from the leader of the community and leader within the local government, all the way through to the neighborhoods, they developed a practice and a system to make sure that everyone knew that obesity was something they wanted to address as a state. In Boston, we see a lot of focus around the community engagement, particularly around early childhood and using PSA, public service announcements to get the community to understand that they can contribute significantly to the development, social, emotional, and physical development of children. So whether it be they show a public service announcement that has a child going into a barber shop, and as they're walking, the dad or the grandfather is counting the steps with them, or another person in the community showing them exactly how they can sing or dance or count with the children. That will expand the children's language capacity and help with their social and emotional development. So they use a lot of that the way of engaging the community to make it very small bites that they can understand that they can contribute as well. In the same concept of the village, it takes a village to raise a child. My belief is that it takes that same village, if you will, in some instances, to help to develop their social emotional development all around. Okay. Combining heart with general knowledge and science. This is a lot of the work that I've been doing. And this is the delivery of care model, L.E.G.S. And it's really love, empathy, gratitude, and smiles. If we are going to go into the schools or into our families' homes, if we are going to be attempting to recruit families or to engage and invite families to participate in at any level in the work of advocacy, if we are going to be effective in working with children who may be experiencing some challenging things within the school setting, if we're going to be effective in helping a parent deal with depression while helping to develop their children, I am saying we need love, empathy, gratitude, and smiles. This is the way when we think about embracing, when we're thinking about the true partnership, when we're thinking about being effective to help them go through the parent engagement and involvement continuum, when we're thinking about, just going to the next slide, if we're thinking that we want to be powerful and creative engagers, if we want to really be consistent in any way around this particular work, this is my delivery model. We're saying you need love, empathy, and gratitude and smiles. And it's not something that is foreign. We generally know this, but sometimes it seems that as the things get a little bit difficult within the workplace sometimes, and even in our own family life, sometimes we lose sight of this. And so when we think about the actual work itself, it makes us reflect, where am I in this area of love when I'm thinking about the families and the children who are coming into the child development center? Where am I in terms of my thinking about the dad that is coming into the center and so forth? Where am I in terms of empathy? Where am I in terms of my facial expressions when they come through the door? Do they feel and experience the warmth and the nurturing and the engaging and the inviting that is so critical to help individuals gravitate to particular programs? This is what I'm referring to now as when we speak about equity and disparity. The next two slides will speak about equity and empathy, and we'll also have disparities and apathy. So on one side, let's just imagine, as you're looking at the slides, on the left side, let's imagine that that's the policies and the laws and the practices, and think about them in terms of having a mindset that we know many of these policies and laws, many of them are filled with inequities, many of them are unfair and unjust toward particular population groups. So that's the left side. However, there are human agents such as you all on the line, right, who are filled with empathy, and you work toward the elimination of the disparities and you promote equity. And so that's a lot of the work that has been happening, and we can, just looking at the video and the formation of the work that was being done, and just them collecting information, and the whole group putting together the mission and the vision and the structure and all of that for the purpose of developing a network, a national network that will have voice within their respective communities but across the nation to impact policies, practices, to impact laws and governance, and just to have the ability to say, this is what we are thinking is relevant and important for our families and for our communities, and we would like to make sure that it's infused in whatever is being developed. But now we have the same, looking at the left side, you're still looking at institutional racism, oppression, structural oppression, all of these different things that we know that really have disparities built into them. And you have human agents, unfortunately, and this is what we will encounter, and families and parent leaders and so forth will encounter, individuals who really is apathetic and really have apathy, are not able to really put themselves in a place where they can empathize with the folk who they're working with. When you combine the human agents with such emotions and such oriented mindset with the institutional and structural racism and oppression, what tends to happen is we get disconnect, disengagement, despair, depression, poor quality of life for so many of our families, from the smallest of babies all the way up. And unfortunately, we see early death, and that is in the research in terms of what disparities can do, the lack of access to proper quality care, resources, and information. If we move, let me just go back just for a moment. I just need to mention the inside of this slide. When we have the human agents with the empathy, and we have the working of love, and, you know, we have the empathy, we have the gratitude and the smiles, and we have people who are compassionate and desiring to help another person or support another person, individuals with lived experiences who can come along and peer and mentor individuals, we get engagement, connection, relationship. We have authenticity flowing, partnership, and quality of life. The research speaks to this, but I don't need to share this and then add the research. You who are on the line, it's pretty, the experiences of the providers that are on the line may be diverse, the families may be diverse, but these are pretty central themes that we're finding. If you have empathy, even if you have these institutional racism and oppression and the disparities, if we have individuals who are continuing to elevate themselves in the area of education and knowledge, particularly around social issues and injustices for their children and their families, we do get some of the work done. But it requires everyone committed to this kind of intense work on the platform of love, empathy, gratitude, and smiles. Moving along, organizational culture and level of effort. This is what I am also finding in the communities, and I developed a screening tool, an assessment tool, an engagement that I shared with some colleagues in Connecticut who were gracious enough to complete the tools, send them back to me for us to be able to get the information around what their experiences have been. And what we found is that when you have the level of effort and investment that is necessary to really engage families, it is linked to their successes. It's linked to their outcomes. We are starting to see some information that we will be producing later on in my book that will be coming out soon. So let me give you an example of some of the things that we will find. Let's say, for example, we have hi. One second. Let's say we have hi. We're looking at agencies and staff members who use excellent customer service skills. They cultivate the practice of showing respect and treating families with dignity, consistent demonstration of empathy, compassion, and patience. They have ability to remain present, throughout the entire time the worker is in the presence of the family. They demonstrate competence in specific subject areas, and they have effective use of supervision, resources, and peer consultation. We also see where they have, in terms of engagement, they have provided the meaningful opportunities for families to engage in macro system change-related work, in practice, in terms of their leadership. They have given them opportunities to participate at the executive levels as well as in board of directorship. Meetings, they have provided opportunities for the families to participate on quality assurance or continuous quality improvement initiatives, and they are giving them the data to help write the narrative regarding what their experiences have been. And so when we see the actual investment where it's not an afterthought, engagement is not an afterthought. Engagement is in the initial phase of all of the work, in the middle phase, and after, towards the retention and when someone is leaving their organization. Let's move to this diagram. I just want to pause for a moment to make sure that I am being heard, because I see that there's a blinking light. We can hear you. Wonderful. Meaningful family engagement continuum. This I developed again. I've been in this field for a little over 27 years, and I've been a licensed clinical social worker for as long. And in the work that we do, we absolutely work toward the elimination or at least reduction of symptoms that individuals present with. I am proposing that we also, and not just one agency or a few agencies, but all agencies, think not only on addressing the symptoms of what is being presenting, but also have the opportunity to engage in conversation with the families that we're serving and working with around their voice, their level of advocacy voice. Some families may come in, and based on the narrative they're sharing with us, we should be able to look and have the conversation and co-author goals and objectives that helps to develop their voice levels. Critical component, because at times when we focus only on the symptoms, we have some short-term results. However, I propose that as we do both the symptoms and the advocacy-related component, that there would be much more opportunity for the empowerment of the individual and the reduction in a more rapid way of the symptoms that many of them come in with. And so this is a fluid document. Some individuals come into the organization already participating at the legislative processes, participating nationally and internationally. Some of them have meaningful participation in their organizations, such as what I've just mentioned a short while ago. And some of them are very much involved in their community and doing civic engagement. Some come in and they are not psychologically or emotionally available to move in terms of their voice level because of just where the experiences are. And so the idea here is that wherever they are, whoever has the opportunity and the gift to sit with them, it is imperative that they're also listening during the narrative or the storytelling of where their voices are. When we do that, the expectation then is to co-author again with the individual what kind of resources, knowledge, and information they need to help them to develop that voice. And then, of course, provide them the meaningful opportunities for them to participate at the level that they're available to participate at. Okay. Now the next slide will show you a few lenses that I use, and I'm literally saying it is imperative that those who are working with families and communities take a look at these lenses as part of their practice. So generally, in the work that we do, we sometimes focus in on culture, curiosity, humility, sensitivity, and responsiveness. And that is imperative that we do that. It is imperative that we do that. Sometimes, however, we remain in that sphere or that lens and do not take into consideration much of the other elements that we really need to be conscious of as we begin to engage individuals. Again, whether we're going in as a provider or we're at a daycare or child care center, or we're thinking of developing a child care center or education facility, or if we're going to be family advocates or parent leaders coming alongside families to support them in their different meetings and so forth. These are some of the areas. So in terms of the cultural curiosity, humility, sensitivity, and responsiveness, it's us saying that we do not believe that we have the competence about every culture and the experiences of individuals of different cultures may be even different than the experiences even within that culture. So I'll give you an example. I am Caribbean, and I am from the island of Montserrat. But the northern side of Montserrat is different in its culture to the southern side of Montserrat. And so it's very important that we actually learn about the individuals from more than from the cursory glance, if you will, from afar. I had the opportunity to work with some families, work with some staff members, and I asked the question of where your families are from. And one individual said Africa. So I asked, okay, and I was waiting to get the more detail on it, but no detail was forthcoming. And when I asked what part, what nation, it was not known. And it was very important to me to emphasize that with our diverse culture and the diversity we have with individuals coming from all around the world, with their experiences of them in their respective areas, but also their experiences as they journey to the United States, it is imperative that we step back and help them to share a little bit more with us so that we can better engage with them. In terms of and it's not enough to have the cultural curiosity and the humility and the sensitivity. Our responsiveness must be demonstrated. And that's another element that is sometimes missed. We get the sensitivity, but in terms of actually making certain that our, let's say, our child care center or maybe our behavioral health center, our policies, our practices are not responsive. Social determinants, advancing equity and addressing, eliminating disparities. It's a very important component of engagement. Us understanding as we're working with families where they are, what has been the history, the social determinants that's affecting their lives, and also being able to have information about their involvement in any effort toward addressing these issues. When it comes to the interdisciplinary cross-sector and community collaboration, for us to truly engage with families, in terms of the providers now, the providers will absolutely need to embrace collaborative work, embrace the interagency, interdepartmental work, versus the siloed work that sometimes happens. Because for some of our families, when we remain in silo, working independently and not collaborating, we miss the opportunities to support them effectively and to help them move and transition with the quality of life that they actually engaged in at the time that they came into contact with us. In terms of I will jump from the family engagement, the Maslow needs, because I want to show you a diagram as we go forward. But I do want to step back and look at the emotional intelligence and perspective taking, the families and the workforce and self-care. This part is essential because when we're working with our families, we enter in sometimes with the idea that we are here to support, and sometimes we do an excellent job thinking about how we are presenting, what is our facial expression, how aware we are of our personal self, and how we're managing our emotions. Sometimes we're not so good at doing that, and it's very important because we also are modeling with our families. And so when we get into a space, where we actually get our emotions so riled up that we then begin to demonstrate inappropriately, we are not setting the good example, but also we're saying that we are not able to take care of ourselves. And it's important for us to be able to do that, to take care, make sure that our self-care is there, and we are honoring ourselves as we go out to the families and invite others to join this walk with us. So I'm going to go to basic needs and an effective engagement strategy. Many of you on the line may or may not know this slide. I'm trying to get to that. There it is. There it is. Okay. So in this area, this has been my experience. My experience has been that at some point in time, as we were trained around this, is that individuals could not move up on this this triangle before completing the first one, the second one, etc. And we understand it to be more fluid at this time. However, what's important is that when our families, we're engaging our families, us having an understanding of this diagram here, or some sense of it, will help us to better empathize, as well as be available and present, acknowledging the support needs that the individuals may have, the concrete needs that they may have, and be able to provide the resources or link or connection or referral. As an engagement strategy, it has been shown to be very effective when we think about the needs of the families as they present and work with them in that space. It helps us to build the trust and build that relationship, if you will, that says that, yes, they are here for me, rather than having me jump through all these hoops. And unfortunately, that's what some of the history has been. So thinking about, just using that diagram, the blank one now, to think about when we're working with the families, let's say a parent leader is going in and is going to be supporting a family member, or a provider is doing a biopsychosocial assessment, and they are beginning to do the process. When they stop and think about, what are the needs of the families? What resources are in the community? Have I done an asset mapping and looked at the community resources? Have I developed a relationship with the community such that I can do a warm handoff, or I can walk the person down to the next door, or I can connect them in a way that it will be a meaningful referral? What do I know about the community resources? That is essential for the engagement process. And then what that does for families, it empowers them, because then they begin to learn their community resources, and they then can provide for their families and does not necessarily need the support of another person at that point should another need come up. But if they do have that need, whether it's, again, the parent leader or an ambassador, a parent ambassador, or our providers, we are available to help them to be able to secure the resources, or at least link them to opportunities for that. This particular engagement dimension I didn't speak about because I had it right up here to go through now, and it's in regard to the trauma piece. There must be an understanding, if we're going into communities and into the family's life, that they have resilience. In addition to the resilience, they may potentially have some trauma-related things that is impacting them at the point of the time that they entered into your child center, your facility, or your school, or your organization. With that said, the Substance Abuse Mental Health Administrative Services that I mentioned had the concept paper, and these 6 areas here is what is emphasized. And if you download that, you'll quickly be able to see what that's about. Now, the safety one, this one that I mentioned earlier, it's speaking about the safety of both all stakeholder groups, so the staff members and the children. And so I'd like to just share one piece here. I returned from Hawaii on Thursday, and I was at the Hawaii International Conference on Education presenting. And in one of the presentations that I went to, they were speaking about school safety. And the presentation came out from Texas, and they spoke about the fact that when there is a horrific incident or situation in the schools, they see an uptick of anxiety-related behaviors with the children. And so when they exercise the lockdown and they're practicing lockdown, meaning that, okay, this morning we're going to close the door and we're going to do everything that we know we're supposed to do when it's lockdown time. And they would practice that. That might include the children going under the desk or the children going in the safe area where they're told to go. No one's speaking, and they're following the protocols. What this presenter said was, whenever the security guard gets on the intercom in the morning and there's something is happening and he just says a piece, the minute they hear his voice, you see the tension in the room and you feel it. Now, that's not uncommon. But the unfortunate thing is, it's not just around the horrific events that happen. Sometimes in some settings, it's a constant. And so it's imperative that all early child care and education and schools, and I'm proposing that all environments begin to really grab hold of what SAMHSA is, the Substance Abuse Mental Health Services Administration is saying, that trauma is prevalent and there is a need to recognize the signs and the symptoms, and there's a need to respond appropriately, and it's also imperative that nothing we do will re-traumatize individuals. And so that really means paying keen attention to our policies and procedures and our practices. And when our families are developing in terms of their leadership, they're able to, one of the very important and meaningful opportunity can very well be, after they receive the training, to look through policies and procedures, look through practices. Because if our children, if the children are not if they're not emotionally and psychologically and physically safe, learning cannot really happen, at least not effectively. And so that's a very important thing, because we want to be able to help these children and our families be successful in the education setting, because we know that that does open doors if they're able to continue throughout and graduate and go forward in terms of their life experiences. In terms of just one, I would like to just focus in on the empowerment, voice, and choice element. That again is around engagement. If we engage in a way that is effective, the experience does become an empowering one, where we allow the voices to be heard and for them to be able to influence our policies and procedures again. And again, providing choices is a very important piece. For us to understand that is very important when we're thinking about engaging with families. They may have some trauma, and some things we may do, if we're not conscious or at least keep that lens in mind, may re-traumatize them. And so we want to avoid that at all times. Okay. Micro level, meso level, and macro level. Very simply, micro level working directly with individuals and families, meso level working with groups and organizations, and macro level working towards large-scale system change. And everyone here on the line potentially have either done some of this work, is intending to do some of this work, would like to increase their efforts in some of this work. And so what I'd like to show now is some of the areas. On the diagram where I showed all of those blue circles, the three bottom ones are literally about micro, meso, and macro. So you'll have an opportunity to look at those at your leisure. But here when we're speaking about the micro and the meso, we're saying that, again, whether it's an organization, an agency, child development center, that we're proposing the use of strength asset-based approach to care, making sure that use of cultural humility and emotional intelligence framework is in practice, using trauma and resiliency lens. And I'll stop with, in terms of the resiliency piece, it is imperative that we all embrace resiliency and understand that resiliency can help to reduce the impact of the trauma, whether it's adverse childhood experiences that the individuals have had or trauma they've encountered in their adult life for the parents and family members. But knowing that resiliency can, in fact, if we are able to help teach our children resiliency skills in the early child care settings all the way through, and also to engage and help family members see what resiliency skills look like in a day-to-day basis, this will help mitigate or reduce that impact of the negative experiences around trauma. In terms and the hopefulness and being able to bounce back, having that kind of a framework. Program content and delivery process must reflect understanding of the family education movement and valuing of families' needs, interests, preference, strengths, abilities, and their expertise. We know that strength-based approach has been documented for decades. However, it's only in the most recent years that individuals are really understanding what this looks like when we're actually doing the work and creating programs and working with families, how to actually get to that place of understanding what their strengths are, their inspirations, their gifts, etc. In terms of the meso, the organization's vision and mission, is there, again, in any type of documentation that speaks to engagement and what is the policy and the practice and what is the funding stream to support it? Is it a line item actually for the programming? Human resource best practices, staff voice, we find that it's very important that staff members are allowed to also have a voice in terms of for their own emotional, psychological, and physical safety. When we're asking parents or we're providing that safe environment for parents and providing the opportunity for their voices to be heard, and we're not doing so for the staff members, what we actually find is that the staff members become disempowered, the sense of not having a voice. And unfortunately, a parallel process happens here, where we see the staff members are not able to have the empathy needed to really do their work effectively with some of our families. And that's because of the disempowerment that they're experiencing within organizations. So it's very important for the organizations to really think about that. I'm going to move quickly as I see the time approaching. Let's look at staff understanding and confidence in their family engagement practices, staff understanding of the impact of self-care what it does on their practice. I'm going to jump down to monitoring of increased protective factors and decreased risk factors. This is very important in the work that we're doing, that as we're doing the work and we're working and the families are being transparent and opening up to us and sharing their challenges and their risk factors, and we're working with their voices, that we're able to share what we're observing and celebrate it with them. In terms of the organizations again, it's imperative that supervision occurs on a consistent basis, that reflective and introspective work is done. This part is very important because when some of our families who are family leaders, who are parent leaders, ambassadors, when they go into organizations sometimes, some of the experiences are not healthy because of the existing infrastructure and support that is in some of these organizations. So it's very important that as those of us on the line who are actually supervising or in administrative roles, that you're thinking about the work of supervision as a part of the engagement process that actually affects the work of the work that is done with families. It can have a very negative impact, or it can have a wonderful and beautiful impact on the family's experiences. Data trending, it's imperative here that families are included in understanding data, given opportunity to share and explain or be able to find out questions or ask questions about the data that the agency is using to create their policies and their programs that are at the child care development centers and in the schools and in the community provider systems. The market basket value budgeting piece, that is a practice, is really on the economic side of things, and it's really you and I looking at our budgets and seeing what happens when we have engagement, effective engagement. How do we define engagement? What elements goes into engagement? Breaking it down detail to detail, from initial engagement to middle engagement to when we're about to end the program in and of itself, and what does it mean from a monetary standpoint, this engagement piece. At the macro level, and this is some of the work that the parent ambassadors on the lines are doing, some of the families are doing. They're partnering with organizations. Organizations are changing their culture. Some of them are changing their culture to include addressing disparities and promoting equity at community and system levels. And they're giving and sharing opportunities with families to participate in that kind of work. Investing in families to develop education and leadership capacities. Some of the organizations are doing that, and as some of you on the line are actually going through some of the leadership skill development now. Supporting families with education, resources, and information necessary to educate at the individual, community, state, and national level. This is critical. As we have families who are moving into the advocacy role and into their the realm where they will more publicly influence policies and laws and practices, where they're going to be meeting with their legislators or their local officials to share their ideas and their thoughts. It's imperative that our families get the necessary education, resources, the information, and the support they need, which is exactly what is happening right here on this line. Just that development, just sharing information. Committing to using data to inform policies and practices and breaking down data in terms of race and ethnicity, a very important piece, and the sharing of this with families. So families can go back to their communities and maybe participate in the cafes that are being done across the community to look at and work with their
neighbors and leaders in their community to look at the data and see what issues they would like to begin to work with or work on, and what resources they may need to effectively do that. Sharing, again here, sharing the data with diverse stakeholder groups and giving families the opportunities to mine the data alongside staff to tell the story. That pretty much wraps up what I was just sharing. Our families and our communities have the story. There's a lot that's been done around public, in terms of public health, looking at the ecological or the systems approach that says everything is affecting and influencing, and we need to learn from the communities and from the families what it means, whatever this data is that we've just collected. And before we even collect the data, having them help us to see what we should be focusing on, and having the family leaders and ambassadors and organizations supporting them being able to get into that space of learning how to mine the data and tell their stories. And that's it for the, in terms of what I'd like to share, because I'm looking at the time and I want to see if there were some questions.
There are a couple of questions, Alice, that came in during your presentation. I think the first one came in was a question about, could you provide the name of the program that you mentioned in Sydney early on?
Yes. Let's see. Hold on one second. Hold on. Sydney or Switzerland? Hold on one second. I will flip through for that. Is that okay?
Yes.
Okay.
I think it was on slide 16.
Okay.
Where you were talking about family engagement strategies.
All right. Let me see if I jot down the name here. Go ahead to the next question while I just look at my own thing. Yeah.
The next question that came in was from Sharon, and it was kind of a follow-up question more globally about those lists that you were talking about related to the Sydney program, about whether or not you might be able to provide some links or more information about those examples that you had on those slides, and that might be something you could, send to us later.
I can do that.
People were just interested in, knowing more about those examples that you had listed on those slides.
All right. So then I will do that. I'll put together the slides and then send it to you, and then you can send it out.
Okay. And
I'll
we
put
can
together
send it out
the
to
names
everybody that registered.
and links.
So, yes.
Beautiful.
Yep.
Beautiful.
Okay. Another question that we had come in, and if other folks have questions for Alice, please feel free to type them into the chat box, and we'll make sure she gets those. But this question was, Carlos mentioned that he provides cultural humility training to early childhood coalitions, and wondered if he could use slide 24 in your presentation. And I think that was the slide around, you were talking about, you had kind of the 6 stages of meaningful family engagement continuum.
Oh, he absolutely can use, he absolutely can. And it can, if he goes on, Carlos, if you go on to Substance Abuse Mental Health Administration Services website, they have the full concept paper with the 3 E's, which is the events, the experience, and the effect. And then they have 4 R's, which speaks to the recognizing the prevalence and the fact that actually realizing the prevalence, recognize the signs and symptoms, and the 3rd R is being responsive, and the 4th R is to avoid re-traumatization. And then they have a good amount of content. If I can also send you a document that I use when I go into schools to speak about helping them to create a trauma-informed, sensitive environment. I can share that.
Okay, great. We'll be sure to share that with folks on the line. If anyone has any other questions, please feel free to type them in. Okay, we've got a question from Greg. What are your favorite examples about families teaching providers how best to work with them?
Families teaching providers how best to work with them. Well, how about this? I can tell you, I can give you my example, which actually had to do with myself. A teacher sent home a paper and said to me we really like to know about your child as he enters middle school. So what I did was, instead of using the small paper with the few lines that were given to me, I typed out 4 pages of content for them that covers everything from his social and emotional development pieces, the areas that's concerning to him, the things that he wants to work on, as well as some cultural and family-related content, and sent it off to them for them to use. And that has been helpful in us working with the school and myself working with them. Now, what I did with that was that particular document, I shared it with some family advocates in Connecticut. And from their perspective, for those families who cannot go to the school because they're working very much during the time that these meetings are being called to learn about their students, having something with the categories that I had written down and teaching them how to do it would be helpful to them. Now, for some of the families themselves, they have actually some of the families have used the method of engaging the teachers early in the morning, and this is one of the pieces, just early in the morning when they're about to go into school, just to let them know what is happening or what is going on with their child, so that the teachers can be sensitive to that issue. Some are not so comfortable with some, and this is being very frank right now, some teachers, and this is what has happened. I was doing a training with some teachers, and what some of them shared is that they get a little bit anxious when some parents come in to speak to them about their children. And they do get anxious because sometimes the presentation of the parent is such that it does not help them to feel comfortable. And so sometimes they do avoid some parents. And again, it's for them in terms of reducing their anxiety level around it. That's a reality that's also out there.
Okay. We've got one last question I think we can take before we wrap up. And Doug asked, in many communities of color, there's a high level of father absence. Are parents, especially single moms, engaged to find ways to support these children?
Read that last part again. Our parents, go ahead.
Are parents, especially single moms, engaged to find ways to support these children of the families that have a father absence?
Okay. Well, I know in particular that some of our some providers are effectively working with parents and single moms to help them develop their ability to speak with their partners and to so that they can better support their children, even if they're not together. But unfortunately, there are some that do not have the ability or the capacity, because they're not trained, and this is the reality. Some are not trained to effectively engage in conversations regarding fathers. And in some instances, what I've found is that for some fathers, even though they are present, they are actually seen as being invisible to the experience of the family members. So sometimes when they are absent, they are spoken of in very negative ways, but when they are present, they are actually ignored in the process of care. And to wrap that piece now, it's imperative that family members is supported in looking at what the important role is of fathers in the children's life. We understand that mothers care for their children in a particular way, and fathers care for their children in a particular way, and the father's experiences with the children actually help them to develop the ability to take risk, safe risk, and help them to develop some capacities to deal with some of the most challenging experiences. But it will take the providers being able to say, yes, perhaps the father is not present physically, but not ignore the fact that there is a father and that they can work alongside with the mother to the point where the mother is available to begin having dialogue about what it means for that child or the children to have the father involved in some way to help shape their development.
Thank you. I'm going to pass it back to folks to do the thank you and wrap up.
Yes, I just want to say thank you. Awesome information to Dr. Farrell. I'm sorry, I'm clicking in the wrong direction. But we just want to thank everyone who has attended. Thank you to Dr. Alice Farrell. Thank you to the NECFN Steering Committee. We did it. To those who participated in this webinar today, to the tech team at the National TA Network for Children's Behavioral Health, to SAMHSA and Dr. Yannick Edmonds at Project Launch, whose vision inspired the creation of the National Early Childhood Family Network. And thank you, a huge thank you to the University of Maryland for doing this, for helping us to put this on, for giving us the opportunity. Thank you, everyone, for coming and staying and listening. And we encourage you to take the survey. Please stay connected to do the short 5-minute survey. Thank you, and have a great evening.
And I wanted to just put one more plug. We are also having the file box, our very first newsletter. So please take the time to also look at the National Early Childhood Family Network's newsletter. Watch for more upcoming webinars.